Two men stood before the same court in Florence, 1502. Both possessed the same dangerous information about Cesare Borgia's next military campaign. One man shared it openly at dinner with a trusted friend. The other carried it silently behind a measured smile. Within 6 weeks, the first man was exiled. His lands were seized. His family name became a cautionary whisper in every corridor of power in Italy. The second man was Niccolo Machiavelli. He lived another 25 years. The difference between them was not courage. It was not intelligence. It was not even loyalty. The difference was that one of them understood what words actually cost, and the other believed that trust was the same thing as safety. You have made the same mistake the first man made. You have made it recently. And the reason you do not yet know the full price is that the wrong person has not yet decided it is time to collect. There is a specific fantasy that most people carry without ever examining it. The fantasy is that there exists a category of person with whom total honesty carries no risk. A friend so loyal that your secrets dissolve harmlessly inside them. A partner so bonded that your vulnerabilities become their protective instinct. A family member so permanent that the information you share has nowhere dangerous to travel. This fantasy is not naive. It is biological. The human nervous system is wired to seek what psychologists call a secure disclosure partner, someone whose presence reduces cortisol, slows the heart rate, and creates the neurochemical conditions under which the prefrontal cortex relaxes its filtering function. In plain language, when you feel safe with someone, the part of your brain responsible for deciding what to say and what to withhold goes partially offline. You do not choose to overshare. Your body chooses for you. The warm room, the familiar face, the attentive silence, these are not just social pleasantries. They are, whether the other person intends it or not, a disarmament sequence. Machiavelli identified this 5 centuries before neuroscience confirmed it. He watched the courts of Florence, Rome, and the Papal States operate on a single principle that most people still refuse to accept. The most dangerous transfers of information never happen under pressure. They happen under comfort. The reason this keeps happening to intelligent, cautious, self-aware people is structural. It is not a failure of character. It is a failure of model. You are operating with the wrong map of how information moves between human beings. The map most people carry looks like this. Dangerous people are hostile, safe people are warm, and the emotional temperature of a conversation is a reliable indicator of its strategic risk. Cold equals danger, warm equals safety. This map is precisely inverted. Machiavelli documented what he called the architecture of the court, the invisible structure that determined who accumulated power and who lost it in Renaissance Italy. His conclusion was brutal and specific. The men who destroyed others most effectively were never the ones who appeared threatening. They were the ones who appeared interested. He watched Cesare Borgia's inner circle with the precision of a surgeon studying anatomy. The men closest to Borgia who eventually betrayed him did not arrive as enemies. They arrived as the most attentive listeners in every room. They asked questions that felt like care. They remembered details that felt like devotion. They created an atmosphere so convincingly warm that disclosure felt not just safe but morally correct, as though withholding information from them would be a failure of intimacy rather than an act of self-preservation. This is the mechanism. Warmth is the delivery system. Your words are the payload, and the wrong person is not a thief who breaks in through a window. They are a guest you invited through the front door because they brought exactly the right wine and asked exactly the right questions about your life. Behavioral psychology calls this rapport-based elicitation. Intelligence agencies have formalized it into training programs, but it operates identically in your living room, your office, your family gatherings, anywhere the social temperature is warm enough to melt the barrier between what you think and what you say. The reason you keep making expensive disclosures is not that you are foolish. It is that you are using warmth as your primary security system, and warmth is the one thing the wrong person will always provide in abundance. There's a second structural reason this pattern repeats, and it is more insidious than the first. When you share something vulnerable with the wrong person and nothing bad happens immediately, your brain updates its threat model. It reclassifies the person as safe, it reclassifies the disclosure as cost-free, and it lowers the threshold for the next disclosure. This is called reinforcement through non-consequence. The absence of immediate punishment functions neurologically as approval. Your brain treats silence the same way it treats a nod. The wrong person does not need to do anything to accumulate more of your information. They simply need to not react badly to what you have already given them. Their patience is the mechanism. Your relief is the reward cycle. And every conversation that passes without visible damage makes the next conversation more generous. Machiavelli observed this pattern so precisely that he gave it a name in his private letters. He called it the long receipt, the practice of accepting payment over time in small installments, so the debtor never feels the total weight of what they have surrendered until the full account is called. You have been paying installments. You have been paying them for years to specific people in your life. And the reason you do not feel the weight is that the account has not yet been called. But it will be. It always is. Because the wrong person is not collecting your words out of malice. They are collecting them out of instinct. And the moment arrives, in every relationship, without exception, when the dynamic shifts from alliance to competition, from warmth to friction, from trust to leverage. In that moment, every word you ever spoke in comfort becomes available as currency in conflict. Tell me in the comments, which category of information have you already given away to someone who later used the dynamic against you? Was it financial, relational, or something from your past? Write it below. You do not have to name the person. Just name what you gave away. Subscribe if you want to keep going. The 7 specific categories are next, and they are where this becomes personal. There are 7 categories of information that Machiavelli's principles, combined with modern behavioral psychology, identify as carrying the highest strategic cost when delivered to the wrong person. Each one operates as a distinct form of leverage. Each one is shared most frequently in the moments that feel safest. The first is your financial reality, not your general situation, your actual position. The specific gap between where you appear to be and where you actually are. The number in the account. The debt that wakes you at 3 a.m, the investment that underperformed, the timeline that is shortened, the month when the math stops working if nothing changes. You shared this with someone because the weight of carrying it alone had become unbearable. You were not asking for rescue. You were asking for witness. You wanted one person to know the truth, so the truth would feel less crushing. The wrong person received this with empathy. They may have even offered help, but what they stored was not your pain. What they stored was your threshold, the precise point at which financial pressure would make you accept terms you would normally refuse. 6 months later, in a negotiation that appeared completely unrelated, the offer they made was calibrated not to the market, not to fairness, but to what they knew about your desperation timeline. You thought they were being aggressive, they were being precise, they were using a number you gave them over dinner to set a price you would accept under pressure. The second category is your relationship problems, the argument that has not resolved, the distance that opened and has not closed, the thing your partner said that changed the texture of your trust, the doubt that sits in the background of every interaction now, quiet but corrosive. You shared this because relationships are too complex to process alone. You needed an outside perspective. You needed someone to say what you could not see from inside the dynamic. The wrong person gave you that perspective. They listened carefully. They asked clarifying questions. They seemed to understand the nuance. What they actually received was a map of your emotional infrastructure, which relationships load bear your stability, which fractures reduce your capacity, which conflicts consume enough cognitive bandwidth to make you measurably less effective in every other domain of your life. This is not abstract. When your primary relationship is destabilized, your performance in work, in decision-making, in social navigation degrades by measurable percentages. The wrong person now possesses the ability to reference, amplify, or subtly reintroduce that relational friction at the exact moment when your diminished capacity serves their interests. They do not need to sabotage your relationship. They only need to mention it at the right time, in the right tone, to the right audience. A single comment, delivered as concern, can reactivate the entire emotional cascade you thought you had contained. The third category is the one that feels most distant, and therefore most safe to share. Your past. The decision you made that still produces consequences. The version of yourself that existed before the current version. The thing you did that contradicts who you are now. You shared this as evidence of growth. You shared it to create intimacy, the specific vulnerability exchange that signals deepened trust between two people. You shared it because carrying it alone had become a form of isolation, and the person across from you seemed capable of holding it without judgment. They held it without judgment for months, perhaps years, long enough for you to forget the weight of what you had transferred. Then the relationship changed temperature, not dramatically, subtly. a shift from alliance toward competition, a moment where your position became inconvenient to theirs. And suddenly the thing you shared as evidence of transformation was returned to you as evidence of permanent character. Your own words, spoken in trust, delivered back as a verdict in a context that had nothing to do with the original conversation. Psychoanalytic literature calls this introjective weaponization, the process by which intimate disclosures received with warmth become available as attack material when the relational dynamic shifts. You did not just lose that argument. You lost it with your own ammunition, handed freely to the person who would later load it into the weapon. The fourth category is one that most people never identify as dangerous because it feels positive. Your ambitions, your plans, the thing that is beginning to work before it has fully arrived. You are doing well. Something is gaining momentum. Early results are visible, but only to you. The project is not yet public. The success is not yet secured. And the human need to be witnessed in victory is as powerful as the need to be seen in struggle. So you tell someone, not because you needed to, because private victories feel incomplete without a witness. Within weeks, something shifts. The friend's enthusiasm cools. The colleague begins positioning in ways that create friction you cannot quite name. The family member introduces doubt, not hostility, just questions that plant seeds of uncertainty in soil that was previously clear. What you experienced was competitive anxiety activation, the involuntary psychological response that occurs in others when your progress threatens the established hierarchy between you. Most people do not consciously decide to undermine someone they care about. Their nervous system does it for them. Your success triggered a threat response in their status architecture, and their behavior adjusted automatically to restore the previous balance. You handed them the map to your unfinished building. They did not demolish it. They simply applied pressure to the scaffolding before the structure could support its own weight. The fifth category operates at the deepest level of personal architecture. Your fears, not the surface fears, not spiders, not public speaking. The structural fears, the ones that shape your decisions without your conscious awareness. The fear that you are not enough. The fear that your success is borrowed time. The fear that the people closest to you stay out of obligation rather than desire. The fear that if they saw the full truth of who you are, the room would empty. You shared one of these in a moment of exhaustion. The defenses were down. The person was warm. The silence they offered felt like sanctuary. What they received was the source code of your decision-making. Every choice you make, every risk you avoid, every confrontation you sidestep, every opportunity you decline, traces back to one of these core fears. The person who knows your foundational fear knows why you hesitate. They know what will paralyze you. They know which sentence, delivered at the right moment, will collapse your confidence from the inside. This is the most intimate form of leverage that exists between human beings. It does not look like manipulation. It looks like a quiet comment that somehow landed in exactly the place where your certainty was thinnest. The sixth category is your strategic weakness, the specific area where your competence has a gap, the skill you lack, the knowledge you are pretending to have, the domain where you are operating on confidence rather than capability. In professional environments, this information is devastating. The wrong person does not expose your weakness directly. They create situations that require the exact competence you lack, and they do it in contexts where your failure will be visible to the people whose opinion determines your trajectory. The seventh category is the most corrosive of all, your moral compromises. The thing you did that you know was wrong, not by someone else's standard, but by your own. The decision where you chose expedience over integrity. The moment where the person you believe yourself to be and the person you actually were diverged completely. This category carries a unique, destructive charge because it attacks not just your reputation, but your identity. When the wrong person deploys this information, they are not merely embarrassing you. They are introducing a gap between who you claim to be and who you have actually been. And that gap, once visible to others, is almost impossible to close. Machiavelli understood that reputation is not what you have done. Reputation is the story others tell about what you have done. And the person who controls the story controls the reputation. You gave the wrong person editorial access to your story, and you did it because the room was warm and the wine was good, and they asked in exactly the right tone. Everything described so far has been diagnosis. Here is where the understanding shifts. If you have felt a growing weight reading this, a recognition that you have already made several of these disclosures to several wrong people, that feeling is not failure. That feeling is the beginning of a completely different relationship with your own speech. Machiavelli was not a cynic. This is the most commonly misunderstood element of his entire body of work. He was a realist who loved the Republic. He wrote The Prince not as a celebration of manipulation, but as a surgical exposure of how power actually operates, so that the people who were being destroyed by it could finally see the mechanism clearly enough to protect themselves. If something just shifted in your understanding, if you can now see a specific relationship or a specific conversation differently than you did 10 minutes ago, a like puts this in front of someone who is still inside the pattern without being able to name it. The reframe is this: your disclosures were not mistakes born of weakness. They were acts of trust born of a legitimate human need. The need to be known, to be witnessed, to share the weight of being alive with another person. That need is not the problem. The problem is that you directed that need without a framework for evaluating who could actually hold what you were giving them. You were not foolish. You were unequipped. And the difference between those two things is the difference between shame and strategy. The practice that replaces reckless disclosure is not silence. Silence is the overcorrection that creates a different kind of damage: isolation, emotional compression, the slow erosion of intimacy that makes life functional but hollow. The practice is calibration. Machiavelli did not advocate for distrust. He advocated for graduated trust, the systematic matching of disclosure depth to demonstrated reliability over time. You are not predicting betrayal. You are pricing the disclosure. If the cost is manageable, if the worst-case deployment would be embarrassing but not destructive, the disclosure may be appropriate for the current trust level. If the cost is severe, if deployment could damage your financial position, your relationships, your reputation, or your strategic capacity, then the disclosure requires a trust level that must be earned over time, not assumed from warmth. This is not paranoia. This is the same risk assessment you would apply to any investment. You would not hand your entire financial portfolio to someone because they seem nice at dinner. You should not hand your entire psychological portfolio to someone because they seemed attentive in conversation. The second technique addresses the timing problem, the fact that the wrong person accumulates your disclosures over months and years, building a position you cannot see until it is deployed. The practice is deliberate information staging. Share small, low-cost pieces of authentic information first, genuine but not strategically sensitive. Then observe, not what the person says in response, what they do with the information in the days and weeks that follow. Does it travel? Do you hear echoes of your own words from other sources? Does the person reference it in context that suggests they have been thinking about it strategically rather than empathetically? If the information stays contained, genuinely contained, not just apparently contained, then the trust level increases by 1 degree. And the next disclosure can be slightly more significant. This is graduated trust, and it is the only reliable method for distinguishing between people who are safe and people who merely feel safe. The critical distinction, and the one most people miss, is that trustworthiness is not a character trait you perceive. It is a behavioral pattern you verify. You verify it not by how someone makes you feel, but by what they do with what you give them when they believe you are not watching. The third technique is the most difficult and the most important. It addresses the 7 categories directly. Certain categories of information require what Machiavelli implicitly practiced, and what modern strategic communication calls a permanent vault, a category of personal intelligence that is never shared in full with any single person, regardless of the relationship's depth or duration. This does not mean you carry everything alone. It means you distribute strategically. Your financial reality can be discussed with a professional advisor whose incentive structure aligns with your protection. Your relationship struggles can be processed with a therapist whose confidentiality is contractually bound. Your past can be examined in contexts specifically designed for that examination, not in casual conversations where it becomes available inventory. The vault is not about secrecy. It is about sovereignty. It is the recognition that certain pieces of your inner architecture are load-bearing walls, and that removing them from your private structure and placing them in someone else's hands is an architectural decision, not a social one. You would not let a dinner guest rearrange the foundation of your house simply because they expressed interest in architecture. Do not let a warm conversation rearrange the foundation of your strategic position simply because the person expressed interest in your life. Remember the 2 men in Florence. Same court, same information, same danger. One spoke because the room felt safe. The other understood that the room feeling safe was itself the danger. You cannot undo the disclosures you have already made. The words are out. The information has traveled. The wrong person, or people, already hold pieces of your architecture that you cannot retrieve. But you can do something more powerful than retrieval. You can change the pattern going forward with such precision that the old information loses its relevance. People change. Positions shift. The financial pressure resolves. The relationship heals or transforms. The past recedes as the present grows stronger. The information the wrong person holds becomes outdated, but only if you stop providing updates. The most powerful move available to you right now is not confrontation. It is not cutting people off. It is the quiet, permanent decision to match every future disclosure to a verified trust level and to hold the rest in the vault where it belongs. Machiavelli did not survive the most dangerous political environment in European history by being cold. He survived it by being precise. He knew exactly what to share, with whom to share it, and most importantly, what to carry alone. You now have the same framework. The question is not whether you understand it. The question is whether you will use it the next time the room feels warm, the person feels safe, and the words begin rising toward your mouth. That moment is coming. It always does. And now, for the first time, you will recognize it before it arrives. Let us name them now, clearly, so there is no ambiguity about what you are protecting going forward. The first door is your financial reality, not your general situation, your actual position. The gap between what you project and what your bank account confirms at 2 a.m, the debt that shapes your decisions, the timeline that is shorter than anyone knows. When this door is open to the wrong person, they do not sympathize, they calibrate. Every future offer, every negotiation, every favor they extend will be sized precisely to your desperation, and you will not recognize the measurement because you forgot you provided the ruler. The second door is your relationship fractures, the argument that has not resolved, the distance that opened and did not close, the doubt you carry about whether the person beside you is the person you thought they were. When the wrong person walks through this door, they do not comfort you. They acquire a remote control for your emotional stability. They learn exactly which frequency disrupts your signal, and they will use it in rooms that have nothing to do with your relationship. The third door is your past, the version of yourself you have outgrown but cannot erase, the decision that still produces shame when you encounter it unexpectedly. You shared it to demonstrate growth. You shared it to create closeness. The wrong person received it as a gift. And gifts, once given, cannot be governed. The fourth door is your ambition, the thing you are building that no one else can see yet, the project in its early, fragile stage, the plan that requires silence to survive its infancy. When you open this door, you invite 2 responses, and only one of them is support. The other is competitive repositioning so subtle you will mistake it for coincidence for months. The fifth door is your fear, the specific thing that keeps you awake, the scenario you rehearse in the dark. When the wrong person knows your fear, they hold something more powerful than information. They hold the ability to create the exact conditions your nervous system is already scanning for, and your response will be disproportionate because the fear was already loaded before they pulled the trigger. The sixth door is your strategy. How you plan to move, what you are positioning for, the timeline you are operating on. This is the door most professionals leave open without realizing it, because discussing strategy feels like collaboration, not vulnerability. But strategy disclosed to the wrong person is not collaboration. It is a preview screening for your opponent. The seventh door is your opinion of others, the honest assessment you hold about someone who is not in the room. This is the most commonly opened door and the one with the fastest detonation time. Because the wrong person does not need to store this. They do not need to wait for strategic timing. They simply relay it, sometimes within hours, and the damage is immediate, irreversible, and will be attributed to your character rather than their transmission. 7 doors. You have opened every single one of them at some point in your life. You opened them in moments that felt safe, with people who felt trustworthy, in environments that felt private. The doors did not fail you. Your criteria for who gets to walk through them failed you. Machiavelli operated with a spatial metaphor that the powerful men of Florence understood instinctively. Every person has a courtyard and a vault. The courtyard is public. It is where you conduct the business of being seen. You share observations. You discuss weather and philosophy and the general shape of things. The courtyard is generous. It is warm. It costs nothing to keep open. The vault is private. It holds the 7 categories. financial position, relationship reality, past wounds, emerging ambitions, core fears, active strategy, honest assessments of others. The vault is not cold. It is simply governed by a different standard than the courtyard. Most men make a single catastrophic error. They treat every person who is pleasant in the courtyard as someone who has earned access to the vault. They use warmth as the credential. They use comfort as the key. Warmth is not a credential. Comfort is not a key. Time is not a key. Familiarity is not a key. The only key to the vault is demonstrated behavior under pressure. Specifically, how a person handles sensitive information from others when the relational dynamic shifts. Watch how someone treats the secrets of people they no longer like. That behavior is a preview of how they will treat yours. If they weaponize the disclosures of former friends during conflict, the preview is complete. The audition is over. They have shown you the vault policy they operate under, and it will apply to you without exception when the temperature changes. There is a loneliness in what I am describing. You feel it already. Because the implication is that certain things must be carried alone. That the weight of your financial pressure, your relational doubt, your unprocessed past, that this weight must remain on your shoulders without the relief of sharing it. This is not entirely true, but it is more true than you want it to be. The relief of sharing is real. The cost of sharing with the wrong person is also real. And the cost always exceeds the relief, not in the moment, but in the months that follow, when the information has traveled to rooms you will never enter and shaped decisions you will never witness. The practice is not isolation. The practice is selection. You are permitted, required even, to share the weight. But the person who receives it must meet a standard that warmth alone does not satisfy. They must have demonstrated, through observable behavior over meaningful time, that they protect what is given to them, even when protecting it is inconvenient, even when the relationship shifts, even when they are angry. That is a rare standard. And the rarity is the point. The vault is small because it must be, not because the world is hostile, but because the 7 doors protect the architecture of your life, and architecture requires fewer builders than the courtyard requires guests. In his final years, exiled from the courts that had defined his life, Machiavelli wrote letters that revealed something unexpected. He was not bitter, he was not cynical, he was precise. He wrote to a small number of people, men whose behavior he had observed under decades of political pressure, men who had held sensitive information through regime changes, betrayals, and the collapse of alliances, men who had earned the vault not through charm, but through the quiet, unglamorous consistency of keeping what was given to them. His letters to these men were remarkably open, vulnerable even. He shared fears, doubts, ambitions, financial pressures, everything he kept sealed from the wider world. Machiavelli was not a man who trusted no one. He was a man who trusted precisely, and the precision made the trust deeper, not shallower, because the men who received his disclosures knew what it meant to be selected. They knew the vault was small. They knew admission was earned, not granted. That is the paradox most people miss. Strategic restraint does not reduce intimacy. It deepens it. When you share selectively, the people you share with understand the weight of what they have received. The disclosure becomes sacred because it is rare. When you share with everyone, the disclosure becomes currency, cheap, exchangeable, and deployed without hesitation when the market shifts. There is a single moment that determines everything. It arrives before every significant disclosure. It is the half-second between the impulse to speak and the act of speaking. In that half-second, the room feels warm, the person feels safe, the words feel ready. And now, because of what you have learned here, that half-second will feel different. You will recognize it, not as a moment of connection, but as a moment of decision, a gate, a checkpoint. You will ask one silent question in that half-second. Has this person earned what I am about to give them? Not do I want to share this, not does this feel right, not are they being kind right now. Has this person earned it through behavior, through time, through the observable evidence of how they handle what others have trusted them with? If the answer is yes, share. Share fully. Share without reservation. The vault opens for those who have proven they deserve to enter it. If the answer is anything other than yes, the words stay where they are, inside you, carried alone for now. Held with the understanding that carrying something alone is not weakness. It is the most sophisticated form of self-protection available to a human being. In every room you enter for the rest of your life, there will be 2 versions of you available. The first speaks because the room feels warm. He shares because sharing feels like closeness. He trusts because trust feels like strength. He gives his architecture away one conversation at a time and calls it honesty. The second speaks because the person has earned it. He shares because the recipient has demonstrated, not promised, demonstrated, the capacity to hold what is given. He trusts because trust has been verified through observable behavior under pressure. He keeps his architecture intact and calls it wisdom. Both versions are available to you in every conversation. Both feel real. Both feel justified in the moment. Only one of them will still feel justified 6 months later. Machiavelli did not write his warnings for princes. He wrote them for anyone who has ever sat across from a warm, interested, patient person and felt the words begin to rise. You know exactly what I'm describing. You have lived it, you have paid for it, you will not pay for it again. If you want to keep building this kind of awareness, subscribe. There is more of this coming. The words you keep are worth more than the words you give away. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.